There's 1,189 chapters. There's a finite amount of material to work through. There's 33,000, however many it is, 410 verses. Okay? Somebody find out for me. I keep throwing out a number like I know what I'm doing. What is it? 110? 102. 33,102. Thank you. All right. Let's give Dan 5 extra points for tonight on this. All right. Regardless, and that's plus or minus because some people have extra verses if they insist on the bad King James verses that were thrown in there based on screwy manuscripts. Okay. Whatever it is, there's a finite amount of verses. Now, is it a ton of material? Yes, it's a ton of material. Nevertheless, it's still a finite amount. You can search every chapter of the Bible for everything that pertains to a subject that you're studying. Okay? In which case you can approach that perfect induction. You're doing a study on soul and spirit. Okay? You can find every single verse in the Bible that addresses nefesh or ruch or psuke or pneuma. It's a finite amount of material. So most inductions fall into the former, since it's practically impossible to examine every particular thing in its class to see if they all have the same characteristics. You know, imagine that you study insects. Okay? Do you have to view every cockroach on planet Earth to have a comprehensive study on cockroaches? Or if you have a significant data set that you can work with, you know, after the first 10,000 cockroaches, you say, I haven't met one yet that isn't disgusting. Okay? So my imperfect inductive reasoning is now going to declare that cockroaches are disgusting. Okay? Now I'm willing to revise my conclusion if down the road someone shows me a non-disgusting cockroach. At which point I'm going to add to my inductive study a particular breed or style or a class of cockroaches from some obscure place. Yeah, there's a very domesticated cockroach that will fold laundry and will and then I'll revise my opinion. I'll say, wow, not all cockroaches are disgusting. When it comes to biblical studies, we have a finite amount of material. Perfect inductions are also possible with regard to biblical teaching, since the Bible contains a finite and manageable amount of material. More manageable than ever before. More manageable. I say our generation is the most accountable ever in the church age, because of the electronic searching that we have available to us. Whereas what previous generations had to do to search the Scriptures, see if these things are so. It took James Strong's 20 years to put his concordance together. And you have generations of pastors. And how about the Englishman's concordance? It was connected to the King James and connected to the... think about what we have available to us today. It's frightening. In a legitimate fear of the Lord, frightening application of what we're accountable for. All right, the Cartesian Method. The French philosopher, René... How do you pronounce that? Descartes, thank you. Never had a French lesson in my life. Developed a method for discovering truth that began in systematic and methodical doubt. So when you think the Cartesian method, think doubt. Systematic and methodical doubt. Steps include the following: I doubt, therefore I think. Think about it. If you couldn't think, you couldn't doubt. Do you doubt me? In order to doubt me, you'd have to think about it, wouldn't you? I think, therefore I am. If I didn't truly exist, then how could I think? I am, therefore God is. Now that's a stretch that you got to work your way through, and sometimes I wonder, do I buy that? Just because I am, does that mean that God is? Well, yeah, technically, you're right. Yeah, my very existence is testimony to some creator. That's right. So, namely, if an imperfect being exists, then the imperfect implies the perfect, by which I know that. Number 4, God is, therefore the world is. Consequently, I exist, God exists, and the world exists. Well, okay. I'll buy that. And if you doubt it, you just prove his point, don't you? Isn't that great? All right. If there is doubt about any of these conclusions, Descartes outlined a method by which one could obtain certainty, and those are his steps 1 through 4. Those didn't end up on the quiz, did they? I don't think they did. No. Okay. We can give thanks to the Lord tonight because our quiz has been provided for us by Al Downey. So appreciate that. Took some of the load off my schedule this week. All right, so the doubting method is Descartes. The Euclidean method, Euclid. The system of geometry began with a certain basic definitions and axioms held to be self-evident. So you create theorems, you create axioms, postulates and theorems, deduce logically and systematically. And this is actually kind of good. I think this leads us into some abductive realms. I think self-evident truths. There's nothing wrong with that. We hold these truths to be self-evident. There are just certain things that are what they are. And I think that's compatible with the law of identity. I think that's compatible with the laws of non-contradiction, different things. Things are what they are. Basic definitions and axioms held to be self-evident. You know, no bachelor is married. You okay with that? Well, because by definition, what's a bachelor? Yeah, an unmarried man, right? And so the moment he's married, he's no longer a bachelor. The Euclidean deductive method was used in modern times by the great rationalist and philosopher Benedict Spinoza. Again, pay attention to names. If you fail to pay attention to names, then you want to refresh those names before you see your quiz, or as you work your way through your quiz. It'll be take-home open book anyway, so we're not going to set you up here with proctors watching you in a closed book test. All right. From deductive rationalism, Spinoza also deduced the impossibility of miracles, and he began the first systematic effort at negative higher criticism of the Bible. And pretty destructive. In fact, when we get into the bibliology portion of this volume, I enjoy the information that's provided here related to the destructive consequences of what the Germans did there in the 19th century. The higher criticism and all the terrible things. And still, churches today are still reaping the whirlwind based on what they tell you. And breaks my heart, but what are you going to do? Dramatically illustrates that not all methods can be fruitfully utilized in evangelical theology, particularly those with an anti-supernatural implications. It's going to be a flawed methodology to start with. And so why would we want to employ even part of it? Why would we employ any of it, given that its premises, its foundation is flawed to start with? All right. The Transcendental Method. The agnostic philosopher Immanuel Kant, or Kant, credited with the development of the Transcendental Method. It's an argument that's neither deductive nor inductive. It's more reductive, arguing back to necessary preconditions of something being the case. And so this method seeks for necessary conditions of a given state of affairs. It doesn't actually seek the actual cause of them. So rather than seeking back for a cause, it just seeks back for conditions. Necessary conditions for a given state of affairs. Some evangelical thinkers have used this methodology. Cornelius Van Til is mentioned there. John Carnell is another name that's mentioned there. Then the abductive method. Now I like this. Some people mock this. I don't. The abductive method, neither deductive nor inductive. Rather, an abduction is more like an insight or intuitive flash that provides one with a model for doing science or theology, as the case may be. All right, now, word of caution. An insight or an intuitive flash. Okay? our exclusive methodology, okay? We're not going to throw out everything else and just limit ourselves to this. Yes, there will be places in which deductive logic will be employed. There will be cases in which inductive logic will be employed. However, there may be cases in which this insight, this gut sense, this recognition, okay, will be the spark of what you start with. Okay? And how do we start with that? How do we start with that? Well, we had a scripture mentioned earlier, as one who has been found trustworthy, I offer my opinion, the Apostle Paul said. All right? If I'm asked about a realm of doctrine, I'm asked about a passage or something, and I say, well, I haven't studied that lately, but I do know, based on how I know my Father, based upon how I know other passages of Scripture that seem to be applicable, my insight, my gut would say this is what it would be. And I would perhaps proceed with a model that could then explore, is that legitimate, is it not legitimate? All right. Now, in order to do so, what do I got to do? I got to sit around and wait for more flashes of insight? I got to study. I'm going to start implementing other methods of study. I'm going to start implementing deductive studies, inductive studies. I'm going to start using other methods. But I'm not going to throw this out. Because part of what I am today is what He's shaped me to be. And I am developing the mind of Christ. And I am growing in grace and knowledge. David wanted to build a temple, and Nathan said, do what's on your heart. The Lord is with you. Okay? Until He's shown later that, wait a minute, put the brakes on. All right? The thing about the abduction is that we have to be willing to step back and say, you know what? My gut was wrong. Okay? I had a sense, I had an impulse, I had a thought. Now I've looked at it deeper and I've said, you know what? That's not the right approach. That's not the right approach. Okay? Why did David, and then sometimes this is a method we will employ when we're dealing with a why question from the Scripture. Because anytime you're dealing with a why question in the Scripture, chances are there's not a because answer somewhere else in the Scriptures. All right? Why, after Saul died and David became king, why was he limited to only the tribe of Judah for those first 7 years? And why was there a son of Saul who had the other 11 tribes? Why then was it 7 years later that David got all 12 tribes, a unified kingdom, and 33 more years for 40 total? Why was it 7 with only one tribe, and then 33 with the entire nation? Why? Okay. Well, Scripture says what it is, but it doesn't tell us why. It doesn't give us a because. And yet, something that crossed my mind years ago, I thought, well, wait a minute. There seems to be a typology, in a sense, with fulfillment in Jesus Christ, if in fact the millennium is a 1,000-year period, pretty short actually, just a day really, but the millennium is a 1,000-year period in which Jesus Christ reigns over Israel, His own. Judah was David's own, his own tribe. Jesus reigns over Israel, His own, for the 1,000 years. But then in the fullness of time, after the millennium and the new heavens and new earth, in Psalm 2 it says, ask of me, I will surely give you the ends of the earth. The ends of the earth. Not the finite boundaries of Israel from the river to the river and the sea and so forth, but the ends of the earth is your possession. Not just as the son of David on the throne of David, but the Son of Man over all mankind. And in the fullness of time, Jesus reigns over all mankind as the Son of David and the Son of Man. He has the very ends of the earth as His possession. In the millennium, He has the boundaries of Israel. And there are Gentile kings beyond those boundaries that rule their own Gentile kingdoms, that come every year at the Feast of Trumpets, and every year they have to worship Jesus Christ or they get the rain turned off for the following year. All right? Like when your landlord cuts your water off. All right? So